Hello, everybody. Carlos Toro here of FightfulBoxing.com. Here to give you a quick recap of all the big news and big results that happened from this weekend's boxing shows. Lots to talk about. PBC last night was a controversial card, to say the least, but not for the reasons that one would think. PB's top rank yesterday or Friday, I should say. Brant versus Khasan Baysangurov for the WBA middleweight title. We got ShoBox, some ESPN 5 action from the Philippines yesterday to recap. So lots to talk about. But before we get started, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our new Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. We cover everything from MMA to boxing to even pro wrestling. Head on over to our Fightful Pro Wrestling YouTube channel where we got lots to talk about. You know, we got Raw reviews, SmackDown recaps. I mean, yesterday we did or I should say, Sean Ross Sapp, our managing editor, did a Bellator 215 and Bellator 216 recap. So you can head on over to Fightful's MMA and Boxing YouTube channel for that recap. Not a lot to talk about on those shows, unless you want to hear Sean talk about guys getting hit in the nether regions, and Paul Daly and MVP having a highly disappointing main event fight last night. But that's MMA. Later on tonight, we got Elimination Chamber, WWE doing a post-show podcast after that's done. But now, time to talk some boxing. Last night, PBC on Fox, main event, Leo Santa Cruz versus Rafael Rivera for the WBA super version of the World Featherweight title. Very, very one-sided fight. Santa Cruz won with all three judges giving him 119-109. A very one-sided fight. I mean, Santa Cruz just dominated the fight from the start. Rivera was game. He was a much tougher opponent than I guess a lot of people expected him to be. Rivera, you know, coming here as a massive, massive underdog, was originally not supposed to be the opponent for Santa Cruz. It's actually supposed to be Miguel Flores, but Flores suffered an injury about 3 weeks ago, and so they had to find a new opponent for Santa Cruz, and it was Rafael Rivera, who did some good things in there. He was willing to trade with Leo Santa Cruz throughout the fight, but really nothing super impressive. Rivera didn't throw anything that really could have hurt Leo Santa Cruz, and quite honestly, not really the most exciting fight in the world, but there have been worse main event fights on PBC shows, so I'm not gonna degrade this card too much because really it is what you expected. Santa Cruz threw a little more than 1,200 punches throughout the fight, and you know, he was very active in the second half. Santa Cruz and Rivera just kept on throwing and exchanging punches. Strangely enough, in the last 15-20 seconds of each round in the second half of the fight, it was like 2.5 minutes of Santa Cruz, you know, throwing 4 punches for every 1 or 2 punches Rivera threw, and then the two would just have a massive flurry of punches at the absolute end of the round. I don't know why the fight went like this, but Santa Cruz, easy win. And, you know, I'm not overall that impressed with Santa Cruz. He was expected to come out and win. The problem here with Santa Cruz in this fight is that he kept throwing and throwing punches, but it wasn't really hurting Rivera. And so we were just going to get a very long and drawn out fight. After the fight, he said he wants to face any of the other world champions, hopes to come back in June or July, 3 fights a year. And honestly, you know, I'm not sure we're going to get a unification fight next. Santa Cruz said he is willing to fight even Carl Frampton a third time, which, I mean, as we know, those two are capable of giving a massive fight for fans. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think it's about time Santa Cruz would just move up and go to 130, test the waters there, because I don't know if he's ever going to get the unification fights against Oscar Valdez or Josh Warrington or Gary Russell Jr. I mean, look at Russell Jr. They've been teasing Santa Cruz versus Russell for a year and a half now, almost, and they haven't even. And we've seen nothing that would prove that the fight's going to happen anytime soon. So overall, I'm not really holding out my breath for that fight. I'd say let Leo Santa Cruz fight at 130. Maybe put him up against Gervonta Davis. I think that'd be a really fun fight, and a fight that would actually push Gervonta Davis to actually try hard, because you look at his 4 world title fights, he hasn't really done much or 5 world title fights. He hasn't really done much. He's dominated pretty much every single fight. He's defeated Liam Walsh, Jose Pedraza, Francisco Fonseca, Jesus Cuellar, and now recently Hugo Ruiz, all fairly easily. So we haven't really seen what Gervonta Davis can do against someone that can push him back. So I'd be down for watching Santa Cruz versus Davis Jr. Over on the undercard, we got in the co-main event, Omar Figueroa versus John Molina. This was supposed to be a junior welterweight fight, but Molina misweighed massively. No surprise there. Omar Figueroa not really coming in, in shape. But a lot of people thought this fight was going to be a welterweight war. This was going to be an early fight of the year contender. I wasn't really feeling this fight as much as everybody else was. There was some good action there, lots of good exchanges, but it was inconsistent. The action kind of went with like 1 minute, both men were barely throwing anything. The other man, Figueroa would just land a left hook and the place would go wide. Molina was actually the crowd favorite, and a lot of people were really disappointed when it was announced that John Molina lost the fight by a fairly wide unanimous decision, majority decision, actually, I should say. As Molina, it was flabbergasted. The crowd at the Microsoft Theater were flabbergasted. They gave two of the 3 scorecards were in favor of Omar Figueroa. One was, I believe, a 97-93, and the other 98-92. And it was complete mismatch. I mean, the scores were completely all over the place for this fight. I really couldn't tell how on earth you could give Figueroa 8 rounds. That made absolutely no sense. And what's weirder was that, my mistake, it was a unanimous decision. It was 97-93, 98-92, 99-91. So 8-9 rounds to Figueroa. I don't understand how you could possibly even think that. And what's worse was that right before they gave the announcement, there was like a 5-minute wait where they were tallying up the scores, and Jim Lennon Jr. was waiting to announce them, but we didn't get anything. And a lot of people thought, well, hold on, could we be getting some screwball finish, or is we're going to see a draw, or is the scores not tallying up right? But no, they was just a very wide unanimous decision in favor of Omar Figueroa, which again made no sense, because why would you wait so long if it was obvious that from the judge's perspective that Figueroa won the fight? It got bad to the point where Leo Santa Cruz was already making his way down to the ring, and we still hadn't even found out who the winner of the co-main event was. So I don't know. That was weird. I'm not sure Figueroa won. Does deserve to win by that much. I thought I wasn't really scoring the fight, but I thought this was a much closer fight than 98-92 and 99-91. Even 97-93, I think that was a little too much. So opening fight, Sebastian Fundora versus Donnie Marshall. I recommend watching this fight. Out of the 3 cards fights on this card, watch this one for the absolute novelty of watching 6'7" junior middleweight Sebastian Fundora. I mean, again, I'm going to repeat this. He's 6'7" and he's fighting at 154 pounds. That's a fantastic way to sort of open your night, if you ask me. If you're having like a novelty fight such as that, I'm in. I mean, really, I'm all for Sebastian Fundora being on TV. He looked really, really good against Donnie Marshall. I guess a somewhat highly touted prospect who came into this fight undefeated. Fundora had obviously like almost full foot on Donnie Marshall, and Fundora actually was fighting on the inside a lot more than someone with a massive height advantage and should, but he actually did pretty well. His left hand was really, really solid. It's still really weird because Fundora is this giant, lanky, super skinny. And when I say skinny, I mean skinny. And he's fighting on the inside, and it was kind of baffling. But I don't know who his trainer is. I maybe they mentioned on the telecast, but he didn't catch that. But he's been trained really well, really solid fundamentals for someone who of that size. He knows how to utilize the size well, and knows how to utilize it in ways that we haven't really seen before from a guy of that size at such a low weight class. So Fundora won fairly easily, stoppage in the fourth round, I believe. Fundora is really fun to watch. He has a fantastic gimmick. His nickname is a Towering Inferno. He's really fun to watch. I recommend checking this fight out. Fundora, with this performance, he's going to get plenty of PBC televised fights down the road. He's a prospect to watch. But now the issue with the PBC card that I mentioned at the start of the show. Okay, so for those that didn't know, this card, and I don't mean the PBC on Fox card, I mean the entire event taking place at the Microsoft Theater, was supposed to have had a world title fight between Carlos Licona and DJ Creel for the IBF minimum weight title, and Ryosuke Uwasa versus Cesar Juarez for the IBF super bantamweight title eliminator. And the problem here is that we didn't see that. We didn't see any of those two fights. They left that fight for after the TV fights were done. A lot of people on social media were angry, or at least the people I saw on my timeline on Twitter were furious to see that those two fights were not televised. Now, I expressed my thoughts on it on Twitter. If you want to see them, it's at Carlos Toro 360. And I agree with all these people. I don't know how on earth do you not air those two fights. Those two fights were arguably the most interesting ones on paper, aside from Figueroa versus Molina, because a lot of people were excited about that fight. And it just made no sense. There was no FS1 prelim because they were doing college basketball at the same time. They didn't put it on FS2. There was no online stream for it, and it was very weird because BBC, since being on Fox, since I guess re-upping their deal with Fox, they've kind of done a good job of showcasing undercard fights. The Caleb Plant versus Jose Caleb Plant fight was on. It had plenty of undercard fights. The Keith Thurman fight, they also had undercard fights on FS1. So I really couldn't see why you couldn't do the same for this one. At least an online stream would be good. But the way this was handled was incredibly unprofessional, in my opinion. And just to sort of paint a picture. So what happened was, after the fight, people started leaving the Microsoft Theater. There were plenty. I think there were maybe 5-6 fights after the televised main event finish, which is in and of itself bananas. And people started leaving, and there were people, and from what I see on Twitter, there were people, like workers, dismantling like the place as there was boxing fights happening. Not just boxing fights, but world-class fighters in the ring, world titles on the line. And there was a complete lack of disrespect. I'm not going to name one individual who works for PBC, but he has been like completely adamant on saying, like, why would Fox or PBC even care about those two fights? Who wants to see the straw weights? I don't want to see them. I mean, and with it wasn't like, listen, the guys in the world title fights and world title limiter, they're not promoted by PBC. Why should we give them a platform? Well, look, it's almost kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where people are not showing up because you, the tournament organizers, you, the company putting these fights together, you, the TV fighters, the TV people putting on these events are not doing a great job. Are telling these people these fights don't matter. So how on earth could you possibly expect people to care if there really isn't much to really look forward to? I mean, okay, like, it's one thing if you're telling people if you're not going to show these fights. It's one thing, but it's another thing what PBC did. And they were dismantling everything. They were kind of essentially kicking people out of the stands. That you know, Gabe Oppenheim on Twitter, who's a good friend of mine, who was covering the fights. He was like, there were people working, like they took away his chair, they took away his table. He was there trying to cover a fight, a world title fight, and like they practically wouldn't let him. It's a complete lack of disrespect to him, the media, the fans, the fighters themselves who worked so hard to get to this point. It's complete. They spat on their faces and say, your fight doesn't, not just that it doesn't matter, but we're actively trying to sabotage them because we don't care. And that was so bad on PBC's side. And this was horrible on their part. So as far as the untelevised fights are concerned, DJ Creel, from what I could tell, if you can go to Gabe Oppenheim's Twitter, DJ Creel was getting beaten real badly, made an unbelievable comeback in the 12th round to knock down Arlen Licona a few times and stop him to become the new IBF minimum weight world champion. And then Ryosuke Iwasa wins via technical majority decision after Cesar Juarez's cut was starting to get really, really bad, and they wouldn't let the fight continue. I believe it was an accidental clash of heads that caused the cut, and Iwasa gets the decision. From what Gabe Oppenheim was saying, there was no reason to believe Iwasa was winning that fight, but nonetheless, it was the mandatory challenger for DJ Dohany's world title. So we could be getting that rematch later this year if Doheny doesn't fight Daniel Roman in a unification fight this spring, which could very well happen. But the next few weeks we're just gonna have to wait and see. Now moving on to the top rank card, Rob Brant versus Khasan Baysangurov for the WBA regular middleweight title, which is a secondary world title. Canelo Alvarez holds the super title. Much like with Leo Santa Cruz, this was a long, drawn-out fight where Rob Brant was just throwing punches up the wazoo, throwing, almost 100 punches per round on average. And Baysangurov could all he could do was just defend and really not do much. He was game, he was tough, but there was nothing he was going to do. Baysangurov he's a young fighter. But he's never fought at this level before. His best one, I believe, is Paul Valenzuela Jr. So, Rob Brant's at a completely different level, but Brant eventually stops in, I believe, in the 12th round, retains the title. Not much to say there. I mean, if you've seen the Leo Santa Cruz fight, you already kind of have an idea of how the Rob Brant fight was, so not much to say there. Joshua Greer Jr., Michaela Mayer fought on the undercard. Both won their respective fights. Joshua Greer's fight, really fun, I should say. He got knocked down earlier I believe in the third round of his fight, came back to win his fight, retains his WBC Continental Americas title, but overall, not much to say there. It's a good gimmick. I guess this good gimmick of, bringing out a pillow and sending guys to sleep. I think that's a nice little gimmick on Mr. ESPN. So he's a guy to watch out for, but he's still not at the level of some of these other big names I believe, at bantamweight. So he's still got a long road to work on his boxing skill, and he could improve. He could become a world title challenger. I absolutely believe that's totally possible, but in terms of actually winning a world title, that's a completely different story. So we also got the ShoBox card. ShoBox, the new generation, on Friday from Kansas. A doubleheader, a rare doubleheader. We don't usually get 3 or 4 fights, but there's only 2 fights on this card. Shojahan Ergashev defeats Michael Fox. Fairly close, 96-94, 98-92 on 2 cards. So this Ergashev's a really fun guy, a really fun fight. He defeats Michael Fox, ends his perfect record. This was a weird fight. There was a lot of clinching. Fox it was trying to kind of, I don't know what it was trying to do in this fight, but he had a massive height advantage, much like Fundora in his fight against Donnie Marshall. But Michael Fox, was not able to kind of utilize his height advantage all too well throughout the fight. He landed some good shots in the middle portions of the round, but Ergashev, dominated the second half of the fight. I thought Ergashev won the fight fairly easily. I gave him I gave Ergashev a 97-93 card on my scorecard. So Ergashev looks good at 154. So he's a guy. He's a prospect to watch out. He's still nowhere near world title level, but he's a guy that, given another year or 2 more years, I think he will be at that level potentially. Opening bout, we got Thomas Patrick Ward, a bridge prospect who a lot of people here in the West don't know much about, but he is really good. He is this undefeated boxer who is now 26-0, but I believe he only has 4 knockout victories, and people are immediately going to shoot him down because he doesn't knock people out. But fundamentally, this guy is one of the best fighters in the world at 122 pounds, in my opinion. The guy is technically a fantastic boxer. He's a guy that over there in the UK, a lot of people actually do follow Thomas Patrick Ward, and he is close to being at that world title level. He came into this fight ranked number 4 by the WBO. I don't know if he's going to get a world title shot at some point this year. We may be looking at Emmanuel Navarrete, the current champion at 122 pounds, go up against Isaac Dagbe later this year in a rematch. So I don't know where that leaves Thomas Patrick Ward, but he's a guy to watch out for. He defeats Jesse Angel Hernandez. Wide scores. Got them right here: 189, 99, 90, 98, 90. Scores a knockdown in the 4th round. So, looking at Patrick Ward, I like him. He's one of those guys that he's not really flashy, but he's a guy that can definitely showcase his talents against anybody in that weight class and have a good performance. So, hey, I'm all for Thomas Patrick Ward getting a world title shot at the end of the year. I mean, sign me up for that one. Him against Navarrete or Isaac Dagbe. I think that would be a very interesting clash of styles. And I think it'll become a result in a good fight. Lastly, ESPN 5. And I was not planning to talk about this card. I didn't even know this card was happening. But, ESPN 5. I saw that ESPN 5, which is the Philippines version of ESPN. They were doing a worldwide international free stream of their card. Interesting fights headlined by former world champion John Riel Casimero going up against Kenya Yamashita, which I know Japanese boxing fans were kind of interested in this fight because Casimero is a world-class fighter, former 2-time world champion, and Yamashita is one of those Japanese fighters that's up and coming. In a win over Casimero could potentially put him in a position to eventually become a world title contender. Unfortunately for Yamashita, Casimero dominated this fight. One-sided beatdown. Casimero landed the uppercut almost effortlessly throughout the fight. Yamashita was tough, but he didn't really do much in terms of answering back. He was doing a terrible job defending against the uppercut and the jab from Casimero. Yamashita went down in the 6th round. The moment he came back up, fight continues. Casimero throws an uppercut, doesn't land on the chin. It doesn't land here. It lands here on the, and the front of the nose, like over here, and you can just see, like, and Yamashita was already bleeding or from earlier in the fight, so the nose was pretty much broken, and he just landed this wicked uppercut in the nose, not on the chin, not on the jaw, on the nose, literally. And Yamashita kind of spun around, dropped, had no idea where the hell he was, and the fight was stopped, and Casimero wins his 2nd straight fight. Casimero looked good. I liked what I saw from Casimero. I believe this was at 118 pounds. And he looked so much better at this weight than at 115 when he was fighting Jonas Sultan last year. Because, I mean, you look at Jonas Sultan and he's a quality super flyweight, but you look at that fight and Casimero was not really, he didn't look that great physically. Sultan beat him. He earned his eventual world title shot. Casimero regrouped, moved to a higher weight class, it seemed, and he's looking good. He's one, I would not count Casimero out of potential title challenges either next year or either this year or next year, because Casimero is still a really solid fighter. Look at this fight, and that alone will tell you that Casimero is not someone to be underestimated. And also on the card, we saw Dave Peñalosa versus Marcos Cardenas for the vacant WBO Oriental featherweight title. This was another one-sided beatdown. Peñalosa from Cebu City, Philippines, was big fan favorite here on this fight. Peñalosa dominated this fight, worked the body a lot, dropped Cardenas early in the fight, in the fourth round, I believe. And the moment Cardenas got back up, you look at Peñalosa, immediately dropped him a second time with this absolute beautiful 1-2 to the body. It was a thing of beauty. It was, I believe, a left-right hook combination to the body. Cardenas went down. Fight was immediately waived, and Peñalosa is the new WBO Oriental champion. Now, there was a little bit of controversy because the day before, Peñalosa originally weighed in, I believe, 128 pounds or 120.5 pounds from what the announcers on the ESPN 5 card said. Second time came in at 127, and it took him on his third try to finally make 126. So I don't know a whole lot about Peñalosa and any weight issues he may have, but overall, I think that if there is potential problems for Peñalosa to be at 126, I would not be opposed to him moving up in weight, but I don't know if I have not followed Peñalosa's training camp. Maybe there was some issues that it was undergoing. I don't know, but Peñalosa remains unbeaten. Really, really talented prospect. He's not anywhere near world title level yet. He's not even ranked on any of the 4 major governing bodies from what I could tell, but overall, I liked what I saw from Peñalosa. I like these ESPN 5 cards from the Philippines. You go into their channel, they have they sometimes, when for their boxing fight, they would hold do the entire card, or at least a good portion of the card, 3, 4, 5 hour live streams, and then later on, like the next day or even on the same day, they will post the individual fights on their YouTube channel. So I recommend watching these fights. These are fun fights. The crowds are always good. And listen, the Philippines are always home to future world greats. And hey, if you're a global boxing fan, if you're a fan that actively goes out and try to watch as much boxing as possible, ESPN 5 is a tremendous resource to have and watch these fights. So I like what I saw. John Riel Casimero looking really good. If he sticks to bantamweight, I think he could be a future world title challenger. So hey, I like what I saw. Really fun weekend of boxing. Some of the big fights were a little drawn out, but overall, nothing that I would really call boring per se. So those are my thoughts on this weekend's boxing shows. So that about wraps it up for this edition of the Fightful Boxing Podcast. Later this week, we'll have the latest edition of the Fightful Boxing Newsletter covering the Anthony Joshua versus Jarrell Miller fight announcement. Lots of recaps, extended recaps, written recaps of all the fights that I discussed on this podcast and more. Plus all the news that will probably come out this week. Big news as always. So head on over to FightfulBoxing.com for all the latest in terms of boxing. FightfulMMA.com for all your MMA news and coverage and exclusives. FightfulWrestle.com for all things pro wrestling. Head on over to Fightful Pro Wrestling's YouTube channel for Raw recaps, SmackDown recaps. Listen your boy with Sean Ross Sapp and Fightful owner Jimmy Van, and Fightful's MMA and boxing YouTube channel. As I mentioned at the start of the show, if you're interested in MMA, Sean Ross Sapp did a recap of Bellator 215 and 216 last night. Lots to talk about over there. On our boxing side, I did an interview with WBC welterweight champion Shawn Porter, which you can see in its entirety on Fightful's MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. Leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to our new Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. Head on over to Fightful.com for all the latest news regarding MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling. Host Dora of Fightful.com, signing out.